Okay, so the topic I'm refuting is fossil fuels. So my speech is in response to Leah's proposition that continued reliance on fossil fuels is undesirable. Her three secondary claims are fossil fuels are finite and unsustainable. Obtaining fossil fuels is expensive, dangerous, and relies on the cooperation of foreign countries. And continued use of fossil fuels at the current rate would lead to harmful effects such as droughts, flooding, hurricanes, heat waves, and rising sea levels. So I'll be addressing each of her claims in order. In Aaliyah's first secondary claim, she emphasized that fossil fuels are finite and unsustainable. She backs up her claim by stating that EIA estimates that less than half the world's total conventional oil reserves will have been exhausted by 2030. Although she makes a great point, I can't help but stress that it's not a big deal. We go on living our lives like we usually do without worrying about it. This isn't a problem at hand, and at the moment there are solutions to it. Fossil fuels are used on an everyday basis and can be stored for future use. According to an article published by Occupy Theory, they state that advantages of fossil fuels and storing them. They claim fossil fuels has the unlimited potential to generate huge amounts of electricity within a single location. Fossil fuels are regarded with their stability. Gas, oil, and coal are composed of molecules of carbon and hydrogen. Due to their stability and consistency, fossil fuels are easy to store. They do not even form into other compounds, even if stored in cans for an extended period of time. This is crucial since we can store great amount of quantities for the future, so it's not a big deal at the moment. Moving on to her second claim, she states that fossil fuels are expensive, dangerous, and rely on the cooperation of foreign countries. She went on explaining how the U.S. spends almost $7 billion to $1 trillion on fossil fuels, and how the U.S. will have to dig deeper into the Earth's surface and build oiled rigs offshore in order to produce more. Although she brought up many points emphasizing the disadvantages of fossil fuels, she failed on providing any grounds to back up this claim. I'm here to challenge this claim by stating that fossil fuels are a more reliant and reasonable source of energy, especially when in comparison to other energy resources. In an article written by Matthias R. Mahilen, she states, fossil fuels are cheap and reliable sources of energy. They are excellent types of fuel to use for the energy baseload, as opposed to some of the more unreliable energy sources, such as wind and solar. As you can all tell, the wind, like natural occurrences such as like the wind and the sun, they're not very reliant. We can't really depend on them as often because we don't know when it's going to be windy, like all the time. And we don't know if the sun's going to come out or if it's going to rain. So if we were to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, we would be wasting more money than if we just kept using fossil fuels. According to an article written by Lazar Rosenblatt, he states, currently the RE, which is renewable energy, costs are generally higher than that of fossil-based and nuclear energy. In addition to this, unlike well-established conventional designs, the advancement in different RE technologies still requires substantial investments. The economists often use so-called levelized energy costs when comparing different technologies. So the thing is, even if we wanted to transition into renewable energy sources, we can't because we still need to invest time and money into it. There aren't a lot of programs out there that we could do it. The low cost of fossil fuels is crucial to our economy, and if we were to transition to renewable energy, our economy can suffer. So moving on to Aaliyah's third claim, she states that continued use of fossil fuels at the current rate would lead to harmful effects such as droughts, flooding, hurricanes, heat waves, and rising sea levels. She supported her claim by discussing how climate change causes weather patterns to become severe, leading to melting ice caps, causing sea levels to rise. Although fossil fuels is one of the causes to climate change, this claim is way too generic. There are many greenhouse gases out there in the atmosphere that lead to the Earth heating up. There are many other sources to climate change to just greenhouse gases, just like I said. In an article written by Environmental Protection Agency, it states that each of these gases can remain in the atmosphere for different amounts of time, ranging from a few years to thousands of years. All of these gases remain in the atmosphere long enough to become well mixed, meaning that the amount that is measured in the atmosphere is roughly the same all over the world, regardless of the source of emissions. It's biased just to pinpoint fossil fuels as a leading cause to creating Earth's natural disasters when there's plenty of other things out there contributing to it. So to summarize, I think that fossil fuels are a more desirable use of energy source. Not only are they cheap and reliable, they are safe to use, and they're the most efficient source in producing enormous quantities of energy. By stopping the dependency on fossil fuels, we can cause severe damage to the economy, especially since the transitioning costs money and precious time. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm glad you came and talked to me earlier because that was much more appropriate than what you had before, and that worked out pretty well. On the first point, well, first of all, you label everything clearly so it's easy to follow. On the first point, you kind of diminish the argument suggesting that it's not a big deal. I think the argument about being able to store it is maybe an interesting claim. The question is if we don't have anything to store, that's a little bit problematic. The idea that we've used half of it already suggests that, well, what's the starting point at which we started using half of it? Does that mean that we have half as much time again? How much longer until we run out of whatever is currently available? It's, first of all, we're not at the halfway point until 2030, and by the way, that halfway point seems to get pushed back constantly. Every time you turn around, there's a new what's the term that they use? Peak oil production line. I remember that we passed peak oil production 2005, and now, of course, they're talking about 2030. So in essence, it's a long way down the road. And I think that's a good argument to make. And one of the things that you might want to point out is that gives us time to do some of the things that we still need to do. Transitioning to renewable energies at this point is problematic. And then you present your good argument that suggests that it's not really practical for us to do now. The cost is higher. There would be negative costs to society as a result of doing that. One of the things that you might want to do is compare what those negative costs would be versus the supposed costs that occur on the third point. So we get droughts and hurricanes and some other things. Maybe how many jobs are lost, lives are lost, what's the economic impact of those sorts of things compared to what's the economic impact if we didn't have fossil fuels anymore and had to rely on something that was substantially more expensive. Similar kinds of things. How could we measure those things? You didn't really have enough time to get into that sort of thing, but I think that's the way you would pursue that if we were having a longer argument about that. And then on the third point with the harmful effects, I like the idea of suggesting that there are other significant contributors to greenhouse gases. It would be nice if you had a little bit of more information on that and could quantify it to some degree. I don't know what percentage fossil fuels contribute to this, but I suspect that it's a good chunk, but I don't know. And this would be one of those places where the advocate didn't cite the information. You should definitely say that. They didn't tell us how much impact came from fossil fuels, and you can then make the argument that says, plus we get greenhouse gases from X, Y, and Z sources, and they are substantial contributors to that, and I think that would answer that point pretty well. I thought you did a nice job. All right, thank you.